Hi, thank you for joining this session on customer experience and voice of the customer at Michigan Virtual. I'm Scott Watkins. I'm the Business Intelligence Executive at Michigan Virtual, a role I've had for about 4 years now. I'm excited to be able to share with you some tips and some helpful resources from the customer experience and voice of the customer journey at Michigan Virtual. Just a quick rundown on Michigan Virtual. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're focused on providing online educational opportunities for students, as well as education professionals across the state of Michigan. And also, we have a Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute that does a lot of research into best practices for online education, and a lot of research in looking into opportunities for improving online education and teaching into the future. As you can imagine, it's been a pretty busy few months. We've had a lot going on, a lot of new customers and a lot of stakeholder outreach. So everything we're going to go over today in terms of our Voice of the Customer program and customer experience has been more relevant than ever for us. And it's really been at the foundation of what's allowed us to help so many schools over the past few months. So I'll talk a little bit first about why customer experience and why voice of the customer at Michigan Virtual. Michigan Virtual was founded in 1998 and has been a leader and a pioneer in online learning since. So you can imagine 22 years ago, the landscape was quite different. And for a good portion of the past 22 years, Michigan Virtual has been one of the only operators in online learning at the K-12 space in Michigan, at least for a good chunk of those 22 years. More recently, over the past 5 to 10 years, there's been a lot more competition. And as more competition has come into the market, it's been much, much more important for Michigan Virtual to engage with our customers and to listen to our stakeholders and to really build a customer-centric culture within the organization so that we can continue to add value and continue to be a leader in the field. We're also an organization that has a ton of experts on our staff, and these experts, we all know the best practices in the field, and we've been immersed in online learning for so long that a lot of times it's necessary to take a step back and to go out into the field and to really listen. So voice of customer and customer experience at Michigan Virtual has really been critical into helping the organization move ahead and stay competitive as more competition has come up. It's also been important as technology adoption increases ever so rapidly, and staying on top of the trends that what used to take 2 or 3 or 4 years to emerge is now taking a matter of months. So having our fingers on the pulse, so to speak, has been really important for that. So just a quick overview. Customer experience and voice of the customer at Michigan is really rooted in a strategic plan that we put together about 4 years ago. And at that time, one of the things we heard from the customers and from our stakeholders in that strategic planning process was that we do need to spend a little more time listening and thinking about their experience. And we walked away from that strategic planning process with a commitment to providing an awesome experience, really focusing on that awesome experience for our stakeholders as a driver and as a lever to help us scale our operations and grow our customer base and meet other objectives that we had. We realized that it all comes down to that customer experience. So we put a lot into developing the Voice of the Customer program and also a customer-centric service delivery model program where nearly everybody in the organization received training in CX and in customer centricity. And we took a lot of effort to focus on processes and to improve them from a customer-centric point of view. Over the past few years, that's really come to fruition and helped us grow and really be ready to rise to the challenge that COVID-19 and school closures and remote learning has presented. So that's kind of the journey in short for Michigan Virtual. Now we'll spend the better part of our time talking about some of the best practices that we've put into place, really helping you learn from what our experience has been at Michigan Virtual. advance a slide here. So where do we start when it comes to customer experience and voice of the customer? I like to start with the customer journey map. It gives you the opportunity to think about a customer's touch points with your organization across the journey. And take a look at the journey map, and you'll see that we've customized it a little bit. It's a little different than the standard journey map you'll see out there. We've added this delivery and onboard phase and this completion phase. Those are two areas of critical interaction with our customers that the traditional journey maps don't seem to have. So one tip for you is to go in and make the journey map your own. Customize it to your organization and to your customers and the touch points that they have with you. The other thing we've done is we've layered on some elements of the customer experience journey here, where at each touch point or at each phase of the customer journey, we think about the customer's job to be done, kind of from the persona standpoint. What's their desired outcome? What actions and what touch points is the customer presented with at each phase of the journey? And what are their expectations? What do they want and need and expect at each point in their customer journey? And along with that, what are their emotions? And then you can start to measure those expectations relative to what's being delivered. And that's where voice of the customer comes in. Being able to go through and think about how you can connect with your customers at each point along the journey, and what gaps you have between understanding their expectations and understanding their perception of what you're delivering and how you're delivering on those expectations and filling those expectations. That's what gives you these opportunities to improve. So as you go through, think about each of these touch points and think about what I call learning objectives. What do you want to learn about your customers and the different personas at each point of your customer journey map? So once you've created an understanding of your customer experience journey and also the learning objectives that you want for a voice of the customer program, you have to go out and you have to start listening. So how do you listen to voices of the customer? A couple examples and a couple recommendations. I always like to start with your existing channels. Don't overlook your sales team, your customer care staff, any of your staff that's out there interacting in the field. They have a wealth of knowledge about what your customers want and what they expect and what they're working on. Equip them to answer or ask some specific questions, and equip them and empower them to bring that information back and share that information. Let them know a little bit about what they should be listening for, so that they can bring that information back and really provide the roots of your voice of the customer program. They're out there every day. Don't overlook the knowledge that they can bring back. You can also focus on user communities. Michigan Virtual has a few of these where some of our leading customer groups or leading customers come together on a regular occasion with our staff to share what they like and what their experiences are and ideas that they have for improvement. This takes place generally in person with Michigan Person user groups, but for different organizations, it could take different forms. User forums, chat groups. Now, of course, with Zoom and the acceptance of video conferencing, it'd be very easy to assemble these as a quarterly online meeting. So get these communities together if you don't have any, and you may have user communities that you're not even thinking of as a voice of the customer source. So go tap into these communities and listen to what they have to say. There's also focus groups, which are great. They're almost like communities, but they're not on an ongoing basis. You bring a group of unbiased users together, or a group that you want to learn more about, and put them in a setting of 6 to 8 people, and you basically run them through an interview. But you let the participants really lead the discussion. It's a great way to explore open-ended questions, and it's a great way to get started with the voice of the customer program, because they're going to tell you, and they're going to shine some light into areas that you may not even know should be studied and should be asked about in surveys or other work down the line. So do a few focus groups and really listen and start to understand what customers are focused on for your organization. What points of the customer journey are they experiencing some issues? What expectations are being unfulfilled? What are they turning to competitors for that you thought they might be able to rely on you for? These discussions can really shine a lot of light into where you need to focus your efforts. So start with those, and also continue with focus groups as you do surveys too. We'll get into surveys a little bit more next, but surveys a lot of times can show you some surprising results, and you can take those surprising results back and focus group them. Take areas where you might be scratching your head and saying, why are people responding this way? This is really out of the ordinary. Go back to focus groups with those and try to dive deeper into what you've learned in those surveys. And as you go through the focus groups, stay focused on your customer journey. Make sure you're either narrowing in on one element that you really want to focus on, but really direct the conversation of your participants along that journey or to specific points in the journey. I say direct the conversation. You can direct the conversation in a focus group, but don't direct the responses. Let your audience talk, let your audience have dialogue even between them, and make sure you stay flexible during the focus group. Really, really listen and really do a great job taking notes. If you can record the session, that's great. If you can't, invite a couple of people along to be really active and engaged note takers for that. So now we'll get into some surveying, which has been probably the most significant part of our Voice of the Customer program, just because it allows us to reach so many customers. We looked at our customer journey, and we found that probably the best place to start was with our customers who are completing courses with us. It's a natural time to ask them for some feedback, and we know those customers have had a very recent experience, and that experience has probably taken them through the better part of the entire customer journey. So all of our student courses and all of our professional courses end with an invitation to take an end of course survey. We also end our customer care experience with an invitation to take a survey about the customer care experience. And these surveys ask for generally two different types of information, our learning objectives. We ask about how we're doing, and we ask about what we can do better, how we can do better. The how are we doing really focuses on customer satisfaction. Were you highly satisfied with your last interaction? Things of those natures, as well as the Net Promoter Score. We ask that at the end of our end of course surveys. And we also, in places, use the Customer Effort Score, CES, which is, for example, how easy did you find it, or how well were you able to complete some task on a scale of 1 to 5, to find out if there's areas where customers may be experiencing some challenges and we want to focus on our process. So you have the how are we doing, customer effort, customer satisfaction, Net Promoter Score. And then just as important, or even more important, is how can we do better? These are some of the more open-ended questions, and maybe some questions about specific points within the customer journey, where an example from Michigan Virtual, we're asking about specific elements of the instructional format, or interactions with instructors in student courses, or interactions with our technology platform and what's working and what's not working. These are really the actionable items that help us make incremental changes to continue to improve. And as a result of making those incremental changes, you start to see your CSAT and your Net Promoter Score and your customer effort scores improve. So stick to your customer journey, focus on the learning objectives, including how are we doing and what can we do better. And then when it comes to some of the do's and don'ts of surveying, some recommendations I have in terms of best practices, things that you should do is make sure that you're starting with easy questions. Ask a few simple yes or no questions at the beginning to get your respondent to buy into the survey. Likewise, keep any questions that may be looking for more sensitive information, like age or gender or religion or race, keep those at the end of your survey. Those may be things that customers or respondents aren't comfortable answering, and it may result in somebody abandoning your survey. If they abandon the survey at the end of the survey, that's okay. You've probably collected a lot of the how are we doing and how can we do better information already, and the demographics might be more of a nice to have. So ask that at the end. Use open-ended questions where you're trying to get some more feedback, but be careful that you're not forcing responses to open-ended questions, and really don't force response to too many questions at all. You don't want somebody to feel that they need to type in a paragraph or even type in a sentence if they don't have anything to say. That may cause a survey abandonment. So forcing questions or forcing responses really isn't recommended. And then also make sure that you're very conscious of your customer's time. Don't ask them questions that you already know the answer to. That's a don't under the do category, but don't ask them, for example, what course they're enrolled in if they've just come over from a course. Don't ask them what their age or gender or their occupation is if you have that in a profile about them, a user profile. That's all information that you already have. And if you can use some technology and use either an API or some query strings to pass that information in and tie it to the survey, make sure you're doing that to value the customer's time. And also, as you're doing the survey, this is another do, only ask questions that are going to get you information that you know you will use. There's so much information out there that would be really interesting to have, but just collecting interesting information isn't good enough. Collect the information that you know that you can use and that you can act on so that you're not wasting your customers' time and so that you're not overloading you and your team with information that's maybe nice to have, but not necessary. So focus on those necessary questions. And then in terms of some recommendations for what not to do with a survey, avoid excessive length in terms of overall survey and in terms of individual questions. Keep it short, keep it simple. Also, make sure your questions are direct. Don't be ambiguous. Don't introduce any bias into the survey. Don't lead your customers by asking questions in an order that kind of feeds them the information that you want them to have a little bit later on. And ask questions in a straightforward way and in a way that's going to get you a truly unbiased answer. Just as an example, it's political season. You've probably seen some surveys or questionnaires come out in the mail from different candidates. I looked at one the other day, and it's not the exact reading of the question, but it basically said, do you agree that national security is important? Well, I think everybody agrees that national security is important. It didn't ask about its importance relative to any of the other issues. It just asked if it was important. So they're going to get close to 100% yes response rate on that. That doesn't tell them anything. It may let them say that, we understand that national security is important to everyone, but that's not really actionable and valuable information for them. So make sure that you don't have bias as you go through your surveys. So those are just a few tips. Also on surveying, we do use the Qualtrics platform. We've used SurveyMonkey a little bit in the past, and I've used that personally. You can create some pretty good surveys just with Google Forms, but Qualtrics really has been a powerful tool for us in terms of the survey development, the reporting and the sharing of the results, the development of dashboards, and the integrations with some of our other systems that allow us to serve surveys up at the ends of courses or as part of our customer care ticketing system as well. So you've got all these survey results. That's great. What you do with them is really important. You need to close the loop. You need to take some action on this information. The first part of doing this is to share the data. So here's an example of a dashboard that we have at Michigan Virtual. And this is showing our CSAT, or customer satisfaction information for our professional learning survey right here, our student learning survey, and our customer care center. And we simply ask, were you highly satisfied with your last experience? Yes or no? We decided to go with yes or no because if somebody's not highly satisfied, whether they're kind of satisfied or not at all satisfied or highly dissatisfied, we want to treat that the same and we want to act on that. So we've set this dashboard up. Qualtrics, again, is a great tool. It allows us to build really interactive dashboards. This is a static snapshot, of course, but for example, within the platform, you can click on the no category here, the no responses, and it would filter the rest of the dashboard to only show the responses from those who said no. So you can click on that and right away see the open-ended responses or the net promoter scores or some of the other journey-specific questions of your unsatisfied customers to start to focus on where you might have some opportunity. We also use Qualtrics to enable automatic notifications. Whenever a customer care survey comes in and somebody says that they weren't highly satisfied, that triggers an automatic and an instant email to the director of customer care as well as the customer care representative that was handling that ticket. That allows immediate corrective action to be taken if it's merited. And it really gives you ownership and it reminds you that these surveys are out there if you're one of the customer care agents. We also use that in our other surveys. So leadership and those who are overseeing the programs get instant notification and they can really act on that data, both in that immediate sense and then being reminded to go to the dashboards and look at the information. So closing the loop, it's really important to be prompt. You don't want to get back to somebody 3 or 4 days after they had a poor experience. If you can get back to them immediately, that's great. And get back to them with both an apology and corrective action. I've highlighted the corrective action here, noted it here in the slide, because we do want to make sure that we're not just calling to say, sorry, we'll try to do better next time. You want to be able to say, sorry, what can we do to make it better right now? Did I misunderstand your circumstance? Or did maybe I fail to properly explain why we couldn't proceed or why we couldn't fulfill what you were looking for? Make sure, a lot of times, maybe you can't fix the situation, but you can make help the customer understand why you have certain procedures or why you have certain limitations in what you can do. And that goes a long way into customer satisfaction as well. So closing the loop is a really important part of your Voice of the Customer program and CX as a whole. Really, all of that just leads to the culture of customer experience that's been developed at Michigan Virtual. And it started from the top. Leadership embraced the awesome experience objective of our strategic plan 3 or 4 years back. It's been embraced so much that providing an awesome experience is now a value of the organization in our most recent version of the strategic plan. So leadership can power it, but leadership can't do it alone. And we found it's been most successful at Michigan Virtual because everybody owns the customer experience. It's not limited to just a customer experience office or a customer experience officer or director. Every individual in the company owns the customer experience and can do something about the customer experience. And we make sure that everybody's aware of CX and constantly thinking about the journey that our customer's on and how we can improve that journey and how we can increase the value of their interactions with us. 2 other important elements that I wanted to share is making sure that you do celebrate success. You get a lot of great feedback through surveys and through focus groups and through other interactions. And you always do tend to focus on the negative. So step back every once in a while and make sure that you do focus on all of the positive feedback that you're getting through your surveys and through your interactions with customers, and recognize both individuals and teams for doing a great job. And then just as importantly is realize that you are going to get some really harsh criticism. You're going to get a lot of really valuable and constructive criticism, but anytime you ask people for their honest feedback, they're going to give it to you. And it's not always pretty. Make sure that you and your team understand that that's part of this and that each of those negative pieces of feedback isn't something to take personally. It's not an attack on any individual or anybody's character or anybody's ability to do their job. a lot of times it may come across harsh, sometimes it can, and those you can just push off to the side. But every time that you get some sort of a suggestion, or you're told that you're not filling some expectation of a customer, or a customer runs into a difficult situation and they can't understand why or how to continue, that's part of continual improvement. Each of those is a real nugget and a real valuable piece of information to help you fail forward as an organization, and to help you make the continuous improvements that ultimately are what drive customer experience. Making sure that you listen to the customer, that you understand your gaps between what you're delivering and what they're expecting, and that you're improving processes, and that you're taking the steps needed to fill those gaps to really deliver the customer experience that all of us deserve as customers of any organization, and that the most successful organizations are going to continue to provide if they're going to be successful as they move forward. So that concludes what I have today. I do want to take the last second to just thank Tom DeWitt and the CX of M organization and the CX at MSU team for putting this conference on. It was a great conference in person last year. I'm sure it's going great this year, since I'm recording this a few days beforehand. And I look forward to interacting and getting to know all of you a little bit better. I understand that we're going to have a kind of a quick question and answer session live here for a few minutes as this video wraps up. So ask me any questions that you might have, either about Michigan Virtual or our CX and our Voice of the Customer program. And if it's something that you want to reach out on, definitely reach out to me on the program app. As I look over at my phone where it's sitting on my desk next to me, reach out to me on the app. I'd love to hear from all of you, and I hope you enjoy the conference, and looking forward to your questions. Thank you.